hey, if God has told us this land is ours, won't He give it to us? Won't He find some way, whether it's us attacking them and overpowering them, or them just disappearing? It doesn't matter. We can do this. But the people complain once again. And they continue on, verse 31. But the men who had gone up with him said, we can't attack those people. They are stronger than us. And they started to spread lies among the Israelites and a bad report about the land they'd explored. See, just a moment ago, not far behind that, they were saying this land was great. It was everything we want. Now they're saying, whoa, this land is bad. In fact, it even devours up anyone who lives there. Now, I don't know how this land goes from flowing with milk and honey to being something out of like a Star Wars episode, where the ground opens up and eats you. But apparently their fear has gotten bigger than what they remember their own report. And it's just saying there's just no way. And later on, they decide, I knew it. I know exactly what God is doing here. In Numbers 14, verse 2, they grumble against Moses. They're ticked. Moses, you jerk. You brought us out here to kill us. If only we had died in Egypt or in the desert. Why is the Lord bringing us to this land? Remember, this is the promised land. This is the land they were told was going to be their home. It was a beautiful place. Why is the Lord taking us to this country only to have us die in battle? Our wives and little ones will be carried off, their children. It would be better for them to return to Egypt. As I was reading through all this, as I got to this point, God spoke to me and said, you know what, TJ? That's you. You complain way too much. Every time you need something, I am there. Every time you have had a worry or a care, been frightened, not knowing what's going on, I have been there. Why don't you trust me? See, that was the problem with the Israelites. It wasn't their fear. I mean, it's okay to be afraid when you have an army bearing down on you, and the only thing between you and them is this water that you cannot swim, you cannot take your family across. It's reasonable to be scared at that point. It's reasonable to wonder, how am I going to feed myself? How am I going to feed my family? I mean, it's one thing for me to figure out, okay, how do I feed 4 mouths? They had thousands that, I don't even know the number.
Millions.
But I would not want to deal with that problem. When you're in a desert and you're trying to find water, it's difficult. And worrying about dying of thirst is a valid concern. These people that they met in the promised land were giants. In fact, what they're talking about there, from what I understand, is exactly where Goliath's line comes from. So we know Goliath is about 9 foot tall. We can imagine the majority of these guys were about that size too. And I've never met anybody that tall, but I'd be quickening in my boots too. God is not concerned about our fears to the extent that He gets upset because we are afraid. What bothers God, and this is what I've learned, is when we believe the good He has planned for us is bad. When we start to think that God is after us, when God's sole purpose is to bless us only to destroy us, what more can God do? What more can God do to prove to you that He loves and cares and is going to take care of you? If you believe that every act He does is an intent to destroy you. See, they kept looking at everything they came up against in light of what they could do. They looked at all these gifts, I believe, they looked at all these blessings that God gave them, and somehow diminished it into an entitlement. We deserve to have the Red Sea parted. We deserve to have the manna. We deserve to have the water come out of that rock. We deserve to have God protect us. Don't what I have learned is to not look at the blessings as an entitlement, but as simply that what they are, a blessing. God coming through when I needed Him. I know this hurts God's heart because as I look at my own daughter, when she starts to think that I am after her, it breaks my heart. And I don't know what to do. I'm undone. As a father, the last thing I want my child to think is that I hate them. My brother got to a point like that. Didn't matter how much you told him that you love him, he was convinced you didn't. And my hands were tied. I wanted to tell him so much that I loved him, but I couldn't because he had already made up his mind. And at this point, God's looking at the Israelites going, I love you so much, and this is what I want to give you, but I can't because you don't trust me. God should have thrown up his hands and destroyed them right there. I don't know about you, but I probably would have. In fact, long before that. God, it says, God doesn't want to have robots or anybody like that, but you know what? I'm thinking at a point might be better. At least a robot, I know how they're going to act. But that's not what God does. He sends them, He gives them what they want. It's not going for 40 years. And even that, when God does that out of anger, He still follows them. He still provides for them. He lets their clothes last. Their clothes do not diminish. Their shoes do not break for 40 years. Okay. I bought a $150 pair of Red Wing boots before. They do not last 40 years. Almost. But you have to resole the darn things. These, nobody had to resole. At least not, from what I understand in Scripture, that's not what happened. They just seem to last. God still continues to take care of them.